Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. One ranked on ranked matchup, Oklahoma, Michigan, right? So you knew something weird was going to happen. And the 3:30 window just felt like weird stuff was going on. Deion Sanders was playing his third string quarterback and, in meaningful snaps. And there's weird stuff going on. And I remember Clemson, right? So Clemson was losing to Troy. And the internet was freaking out, as they should have been, because Clemson did not look good. But I had the SEC network on. And at the time, Florida in the second half was up 9-6 on the South Florida Bulls. And I put out a tweet. I just said, look, I know we're all focused on Clemson's meltdown, and we were all, including me, wrong on the Clemson Tigers, but just pay attention to this South Florida game, because Florida does not want to lose to the South Florida Bulls. That would be a disaster. Well, fast forward, and in what is one of the most abominable, unexplainable losses from a coaching perspective that I have ever seen, the Florida Gators fall to the South Florida Bulls 18-15 in the swamp. Great picture right there, producer Matt. That is a metaphor for the state of Florida football. And a couple quick things. One, this was a colossal coaching failure by Billy Napier. Two, this is also worth noting. I feel like this is the unofficial end of the Billy Napier era. We look at the schedule. It's not going to happen. He's not going to get the wins he needs. And three, I'll also say this. Just disappointed with even his disposition after the game. Let's go ahead and dive in. And listen, I could sit here and I could go ahead and go play by play. The first quarter, this happened. The second quarter, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the last 3 minutes. And in the last 3 minutes, Billy Napier quite literally making every wrong decision that he possibly could. It was unbelievable. It was, if you had a coaching textbook and said, this is the right decision, he made the wrong decision every single step of the way. So Florida's up 16-15. Let's start with that. They get the ball back with about under 2 minutes to go. I want to make sure that I have all these numbers correct, and I know it's going to be a little bit nitty-gritty, but I think the context matters. They get the ball back with 2:49 to go. They're up 16-15. It's bad enough that you're up 16-15, but it's not terrible. South Florida has 2 timeouts plus the 2-minute timeout, right? So all you got to do, run the ball. And in a worst-case scenario, if you just 3 straight runs, they have to use their 2 timeouts, and they got to go to the length of the field with about 2 minutes to go and no timeouts just to put themselves in field goal range, okay? So that's one, is all you got to do is run the ball. 2:49 left. What does Billy Napier do? First down, incompletion. Not ideal. What was that, Billy Napier? Weird. Okay, whatever. Second down, you run the ball. Okay, a couple seconds come off the clock. Third down, you throw the ball again. And so how about this? South Florida gets the ball back. Remember, Florida got the ball back up 1 with 2:49 to go. South Florida gets the ball back with 2:21 left. 28 seconds come off the clock. And how about this? 0 timeouts used for South Florida. They get the ball back, and they have the 2-minute timeout. So that in and of itself, just a totally disastrous decision, but that pales in comparison to what happened in the final 2 minutes. First of all, we all saw the big penalty, okay? South Florida's driving. Florida has a player. Let me see if I can find his name real quick. I think it's Brendan Bett. You know what he got thrown out of the game for? Unsportsmanlike conduct for, how about this? Spitting on a South Florida player. And I'm sorry for yelling into the mic, but let me say this. What has been the biggest story in sports over the last 72 hours? Oh, I don't know. Jalen Carter giving Dak Prescott the old Hawk Tua, okay? Like, it was the #1 story in sports. Jalen Carter getting ejected from the Cowboys-Eagles game before a snap was played for spitting on an opponent. So if you do nothing else, just keep your saliva to yourself, okay? It feels like a good life lesson in general, but especially on the football field. Don't be spitting on other people. By the way, it's just weird behavior. I've thought about doing a lot of things to a lot of people in my day when I'm mad at them. Give a couple people a slap, give them a slug. Never thought about spitting on somebody, okay? But one time, and it happens right after Jalen Carter. Inexcusable. So that's one 15-yard penalty. And then from there, it just gets worse, okay? And we won't go play-by-play, but we're going to kind of sort of go play-by-play because you get to the 145 mark, okay? And at this point, South Florida is now in field goal range. They got a Grammatica for a kicker. I think Grammatica missed like a 57-yard field goal by about a yard earlier in the quarter. Let me see here. Yeah, he missed a 58-yarder by like a yard. So he's got a leg on him. He's a freaking Grammatica, okay? They're already in field goal range, about 145 left. They run a play. Billy Napier does not call a timeout. Now, Billy Napier has 2 timeouts now. Keep in mind. Does not call a timeout. And we're sitting there thinking, what are they doing? Okay, he's trying to save time for whatever, blah, 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 blah. But as soon as he doesn't call timeouts, you know what I start thinking? Well, there has to be a bigger plan. He's going to let him score, and they're going to get the ball back with whatever time left, and he'll have his 2 timeouts to try to go the length of the field. No. So South Florida runs a play at 145. And remember, they're already in field goal range. Run another play with a minute to go. So 45 seconds comes off the clock. No timeout for Billy Napier. Then it goes down to 22 seconds. And so at this point, you're sitting there saying like, okay, the first one. Okay, so at the 145 mark, you don't call the timeout. At the 1 minute yard mark, they have a 6-yard run inside the red zone. You have to let them score. And listen, I'm not a coach, and I never come on this show and claim that I know more than the coaches who are paid millions. But it's pretty common sense. You either have to use your timeouts and just try to force them to kick a field goal and get the ball back with whatever time you have left, or you got to let them score. So then what happens? Play is run at 145, doesn't call the timeout. Play is run at 1 minute, doesn't call the timeout. Then in 22 seconds, he decides to call a timeout, and you say, okay, well, now he's just definitely going to let him score because they're inside the 10-yard line. I know, calls a second timeout with about, whatever it is, doesn't even matter, 18, 17 seconds left. South Florida runs another play, lets the clock run down to 3 seconds, kicks the field goal, game winner. So first of all, bottom line, everything that Billy Napier could have done wrong over the final 2 minutes, he did. Matt, this is your 2-minute clip, just so you know. Everything he could have done wrong, he did. Doesn't let time run off the clock when they're on offense. Gets it with 2:49 left. Easily could have forced South Florida, to use its timeouts. They do not. Punts the ball away. You get a player ejected for spitting, which I'm sorry, 2 days after Jalen Carter is inexcusable. You don't use your timeouts. You don't let them score. You then use your timeouts. You then put them in position where all they have to do is make a chip shot field goal with a freaking Grammatica as a head coach, or as a kicker, Yeah, we know how that's going to end with a game-losing field goal. So first of all, credit to Alex Golish, but some big picture things. First of all, you know what was especially frustrating for me? Billy Napier's comments after the game. Because listen, I know there's no way to answer these questions correctly, and you screwed up. You screwed up. But producer Matt, you can put up the first tweet of the quotes. Graham Hall, who's one of their writers at 24/7. Producer Matt and I met him at the Final Four. Very nice guy. Florida now a basketball school, by the way. Billy Napier's first comments. I think that we can do much better. We can coach much better. We can play much better. Obviously, I don't like these any more than fans do. We have to do much better. Listen, it's year 4. I think we're past we have to do much better. We have to take care of business. And I think what's frustrating is, you know what these quotes sound like? Quotes after a bad loss in year 1 from Billy Napier. Quotes after a bad loss in year 2 under Billy Napier. Remember that loss at Utah to open the season when they couldn't even line up in punt formation correctly, or punt return, whatever it was? These are the same comments. By the way, last year, you get blown out by Florida at home in week 1. Same comments. You get blown out by Texas A&M in your home opener in the SEC. Same comments. At some point, stop making the same freaking comments and start making adjustments. Producer Matt, you could share the second one, but I think at this point it's irrelevant. It's just so frustrating that this is the discourse coming out of this program in year 4. Second quote. I think the procedural penalties, obviously we can live with technical penalties. There's always going to be a handful of those. The ones that keep you up at night are player decision-making. They're under my leadership. It's ultimately my responsibility. Yeah, Player procedure penalties aren't great. You know what else isn't great? You know what else is under your control? How about play clock, play management, things of that nature? So a couple quick things here. One, I think it's unofficially over for Billy Napier. We're recording here at 11:32 on Sunday afternoon, Sunday morning, heading into week 1 of the NFL. I don't think by the end of week 1 he's getting fired, but he's not winning the games that are needed. But what I'll say, and we'll get to the schedule in a second, what I think is interesting is it's an interesting loss from this perspective. I think it actually gives a lot of Florida fans some clarification on, like, okay, this is definitively who our program is. And I think it gives them some closure. I'll give credit. My buddy, I won't name his name, but I have a lawyer who's a Gator fan. Okay. When I say a lawyer, I don't mean like I'm in trouble with the law. I did something stupid, knock on wood. He handles my contracts. If we have a deal with the whatever, he just looks them over, but he's a Gators fan. And I texted him after the game and I said, hey, only 50 something days till Todd Golden's Gators take the floor. And we were joking back and forth, but what he said was, and I don't want to speak for all Gators fans, but I think he speaks for most when he says, in some way, almost, I could read it almost verbatim, but he said, at some ways, I'm basically at peace because now I don't have to keep talking myself into maybe this is the guy. Maybe he'll figure it out. Maybe in year 3, maybe in year 4, maybe in year 5, whatever. I just know that this is what this guy is. He's going to lose. First of all, the offense that he runs, and my buddy brought this up during the summer to me, and I'll give my buddy credit because he wasn't one of these people that got hyped up by the win streak to end the season. He was one that was realistic that said, listen, I think given who Billy Napier is, like 9-3 is the ceiling. And I think, he told me in the summer, 8-4 is what I'm hoping for. And I think 7-5 is back in play. But the point is that after this loss, he basically said, like, look, dude, it gives me closure. It gives me some sort of peace knowing he's not the guy. This is who we are always going to be. First of all, with this offense that Billy Napier is still the play caller of, guess what? With this offense, what this means is pretty simple. This is always who we're going to be. We're never going to be in a position to just blow people out. We're never going to be in a position to just be up against good teams 24-10 with 4 minutes to go and whatever. It's always going to be this nip and tuck back and forth game. But beyond that, he said, this is who we're going to be. We're going to make dumb decisions at the worst possible time. Billy Napier's game management is not what it needs to be. And we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot and we're going to lose and it doesn't matter. And so I think that's where most Florida fans are. I think, by the way, even at this time last year, I was an advocate of keeping Billy Napier because you keep the team together. You do have a talented roster with DJ Lagway. I think we're past that point now. If you lose everybody in the process of firing the coach, so be it, because guess what? They're not getting better. They look like the exact same team as week 1 and week 2 of last year, and they look like they've regressed pretty much everywhere, including, by the way, a quarterback. And I'm not going to pin this on DJ Lagway, a couple drop passes, whatever, but does he look significantly better than a year ago? No. And if he's not, then guess what? That falls on the coach. Lastly, producer Matt, you can pop up the schedule whenever you want. The bottom line is, like, look, another reason why, for people who are like, oh, you're being too negative, just look at the schedule, okay? So this is why this loss is so big. Because of your next 10 games, you had to start 2-0 against Long Island and against South Florida. Here's why. Because the rest of your schedule is insane. Just the next 4. Let's just take the next 4. At LSU next week, at Miami next week, or the week after, by Texas at home, at A&M. So just your next 4. At LSU, at Miami, Texas at home, at A&M. And that doesn't include, by the way, Georgia, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, or Florida State. Here's the crazy part. I looked this up the other day. I looked this up on Saturday night. Of Florida's 10 remaining opponents, 10 teams are left on the schedule. They have 8 teams that are currently ranked. One of the teams that is not ranked is Mississippi State, who just beat Arizona State and will be ranked in the next top 25 poll, I would assume. So you just talk about a colossal failure. This was it. This was a game you had to win. And now you look at that schedule at LSU, at Miami. By the way, at Ole Miss late in the year. Florida State all of a sudden looks like a real team. Tennessee clearly has not dropped off with Joey Aguilar. Ole Miss, whatever. We could go on and on. This is a disaster. This was a game you had to win. This is a game you don't win. And it's a matter of if not when. Billy Napier is no longer the head coach of the Florida Gators.